suggested we do a podcast on Christmas foods. What was your reaction?
I was a little curious what that meant to you because I don't have a lot of distinct memories about there being a particular dish or meal. I remember Christmas Eve being a big meal, and I remember Margaret, your mom's sticky buns in the morning.
Yep.
But it's just funny how like my associations with Christmas memories are not really the food.
But do you know what I think is interesting about this? I'm going to tell the story about the big thing about our food. And this tells me he wasn't really a big part of the story. He wasn't as involved as the other kids in this, if you don't have memories. It started when you guys were really young, and one of you said once, can we cook on Christmas Eve? I'm sure it had to be Esther. Esther
and Andres and Leah became the professional cooks.
They're all amazing cooks. And
I'm a pretty good
so
cook.
they made, you're a good cook, but they loved it growing up. Earlier.
Yeah.
And so they made, like, it was either spaghetti or tacos. And then we decided on a tradition that time. This was really fun. Let's do it every year, but no meal can be repeated. See, and that's what I love about the story. And I find it fascinating that that's not what you remember. But the other kids would spend lots of time figuring out what else they could do. So I know we had spaghetti, tacos, all the
it had
general
to be
ones.
within their capacity of like skills and scope.
But that's what was fun. And then I remember when we got to the year, I think Andres was like junior high, and he gave us this list. He wanted to do a 7-course Asian meal. And this was before stores. Now you can find all these ingredients in any store. Back then you couldn't. Tim went to Lunds and Byerly's and tried to get help and said, where do I find, he did vanilla custard, but from the vanilla bean. Everything was from its source. And then he went to an Asian food store. All these things. But it was a single-spaced, full thing typed out of the ingredients. That's the one that really stays in my mind because it is the very first time that we had this just amazing meal. And he became a chef. So when you think about that, that just fits, doesn't it?
Well, and what stands out for food with Christmas would be at your parents, especially, because it would be like the creamed corn, the ham, kind of the more traditional Midwestern fare for Christmas meal. And your family, it's interesting because your families are both in Jackson, so we would spend, a long weekend or a few days over Christmas in Jackson. And the different spaces were so different.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more.
The Johnsons.
I don't remember.
So we would stay at your parents' house, and especially in the old house, it was a very formal house with high ceilings and like kind of decorative, accents, and it was quieter. We were expected to like be a little bit more subdued, and it was still like very fun, but the meal was very proper. And we'd go to the Titus's across town.
In an apartment.
And Margaret was living in an apartment building, and the Titus's are just a little bit more rambunctious. Like they're louder, they are funnier in a sense that they're like kind of like ribbing each other and like telling funny stories and like teasing, and it's just a louder kind of more party vibe. And the kids kind of had free reign of the hallway systems, so we spent all of our time in like the apartment building's lounge and playing tag in the hallways, running out into the snow, and we'd come back and grab some food and then go back out into the hallways.
And between Tim and Tom, there was all kinds of shenanigans. Because Tom is really kind of an instigator. He loves to.
Well, and Dave.
And Dave and Paul.
Totally, I agree. Totally different families.
Yeah.
And both were really fun, but it was just different energies.
And my dad died when he was 55, so that was a long time before.
Before I was born.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention about Margaret that I just thought was so amazing. So she was still living alone until like 90, probably 91, I think. But she had 2 meals that she would fix. So whenever we would come down, and she lived in a little tiny apartment by then, she would always ask, and she still entertained. I'm just so amazed because I don't know that I will entertain people if I live to be 90. But she would say, do you want egg bake? They would be with her caramel rolls. Or, what was her a barbecue. She did really good, made both amazing things. And she would ask.
It'd be like barbecue and like baked beans.
So she had learned to simplify life, and she just said she had 2 standard offers. She could freely invite people over. She was known for those dishes. Everyone knew that. And I thought, what an awesome way to simplify life. You know, we get carried away with thinking, oh, if I'm at company and make a big deal and do the whole thing. That was really very special for me to see that and say life can be simple and good. And I just love.
She also had like limited means, and she could feed a lot of people with those 2 options.
Yes. Yes.
And I think another thing that was a part of her menu was rhubarb crisp or apple crisp.
Oh yeah, that you make in her honor.
She made a.
And between episodes, just recording now, Hank brought up that's like one of his like memories too, is like crisps, rhubarb and apple, and then we just had that like during the World Series when we had friends over.
Now, some of the other foods that we have are lefse, but now, you know, everything's skipping a generation. You do remember lefse, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you have it. No, and Grandpa Olson. And tell them what you do with your grandma, because she's much more of a cook. She's got another Grandma Karen.
Hank's other Grandma Karen.
Yeah, so I, around like December 10th, probably like a week or 2 before Christmas, we go over there and make Christmas cookies.
And it's like cousins, aunts and uncles.
Yeah.
It's like a whole day.
Yeah. Whole day, pretty much the entire family.
Many different kinds of cookies.
Yeah.
And they have a big family.
So.
And that will be a tradition in a very, I mean, I just think that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
One of the funny memories I just had for the first time in a long time was opening presents at your parents' house, Jerome and Artis's house. Jerome and Artis would give me the other nice gift I would get each year, and we're not talking extravagant, but you know, like a $30, $40 item, which was pretty rare in my life then. And one year I opened their gift, and it was like paper towel roll or a toilet paper roll, like just the cardboard at the end with matches like taped to it, or sticking out, and it had written on it Norwegian flashlight. And I was like, I was way too sensitive to think it was funny.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at me laughing, and I just remember fighting back tears and being so disappointed and like embarrassed. And then your dad went and got my real present, and it was a complete set of baseball cards for that season, which I loved.
Oh, that is funny.
But
I
spare
forgot
me. That's why I never embarrassed Hank.
Oh, right, of course. Parents are meant to. But I also think that's interesting because we don't remember that, and we were at the same thing. You know, the things that stick from our own perspective, in our own minds, what ends up being the big deal is really precious. I love that.
Was that the year that he burned the house down?
Yeah, that's right. No.
It was dark and I needed a flashlight.
That's right.
So I've always said I love things like lefse, krumkaka. You guys will think of all kinds of things that you love, but I guess not enough because I'm not learning to make them. I just love if I'm ever treated to them.
Rice pudding. Rice pudding is one of my favorites.
Oh, yes.
It's so good. And I wouldn't want it all year. To me,
yes.
There's certain, like, lefse is so good, but part of what makes it so good is that it really only comes out for us at, like, Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yes.
And I look forward to it, and that night you get to eat as much of it as you want.
My Christmas had 2 Norwegians from Norway.
Growing up.
Uncle Ole drove his Model A from Minneapolis to Jackson every year for Christmas, and his sister, who was my grandma, and he would talk in Norwegian, and they would, we had things like, what did I say that milky stuff was?
Oh, I love that.
Oh.
Rumagret.
No, Rumagret?
Rumagret.
Okay, anyway. We had a soup that was just all milk, and it had things floating in it. And it was horrible.
Oyster stew.
Oyster stew is the
oyster
stew.
Okay.
I hated oyster stew.
Here's a childhood memory to haunt you.
My brother Tom loved it. It was just like, oh, that's horrible. And that's what we had every Christmas Eve because of the Norwegian.
Now, you occasionally had lutefisk too, didn't you?
No,
we
never
did.
did.
My family had lutefisk.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we share to this day is a love for pickled herring.
Oh, yes.
Like, you and I both look forward to pickled herring at Christmas.
But that was not a tradition.
For you as a kid.
No, but I loved.
But it's an interesting. It could have been.
Yeah.
Scandinavian, Midwestern
Yep.
families were eating pickled herring, I would imagine.
Yeah. But Rumagroot, my Uncle Ole came down, and I grew up on a dairy farm, and he got a bunch of milk, and he put it in a measuring cup, big one, and he stuck it up in the cupboard to curdle. He wanted it to curdle, and it would not curdle. And it was kind of like he was making his Rumagroot, and the milk didn't cooperate because it was, I don't know.
Oh, maybe that's why you don't like it. That batch
Yeah.
didn't turn out.
So, did you hear about the Norwegian farmer that loved his wife so much he told her?
Yeah.
Speaking of Sven and Ole, like,
Yeah, I love you.
isn't that a good joke?
Yeah.
Did you hear about the Norwegian farmer that loved his wife so much he told her?
Oh, okay.
If any of you
Yes,
have a better
yes.
Sven and Ole joke,
Okay.
Okay.
or
Oh, I've got some.
Oh, and we're not going to
But
get
they're
started. You know some long
Ole
ones that
Hansen
I-
Lars.
send us your jokes.
But, but it is just pretty funny. As you can tell, we have some Scandinavian heritage here, but that is just very fun. Speaking of cooking, do you remember when you guys were young and we homeschooled, and we, for 1 month, 1 year, I bought a whole set of cookbooks from different countries, 12 countries. So you each picked a country, so that every month we would cook
Yeah, I
from that
remember
country.
that, yeah.
And one of them was Norway, and by the end of the month, your comment was, "Oh, I've had enough white food."
Yeah,
So that's kind of
I was probably profoundly disappointed to return to like the cultural inheritance that I was living in, because a lot of the world eats better than
yeah.
Midwest or Scandinavia. I've come to love it now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
man, I love spicy, rich food.
Right. But we didn't grow up with that.
No.
We didn't grow up with being able to order pizza. We'd make pizza from a box, and it was a rare thing. So I mean, life has just changed with food, and Christmas too. Now just
Well, I think too, like from my childhood, which is kind of what we started with, went back to your childhoods. Hank's childhood, our Christmas Eve is what we spend together.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas Day we spend with my wife's family. But Christmas Eve has really evolved in just the 12 years Hank has been with us. Like some years, there's a lot of us here. Some years, it's just Jamie, Hank, and I, or Leah, or Andres and Leah, and now Leah and Matthew. And so it's like this, and what that has looked like is there are years we have kind of a traditional Christmas meal that now Andres and Leah have taken the lead on. And some years we've ordered Chinese food.
Yeah.
Or we've had ethnic food. And you were bringing up when we were getting ready for this episode, the year that, I think it was like probably Esther, Andres, and Leah made lamb meatballs, and Grandma Margaret was so annoyed because now what she's supposed to eat, because she's not going to eat a lamb.
she wanted
And
a special
she
meal.
sat there for an hour belly aching that someone should probably make her something else.
Yeah. Margaret.
What year was it when Justin and Steph came over on Christmas Eve?
And helped cook. Yeah, that would have probably been, you were probably like 8,
I thought it was like 2
Yeah,
years ago.
two of, Jamie and I, two of our closest friends, Justin and Steffi.
When they made that mac and
Justin
cheese.
is like a phenomenal chef,
Yeah.
and Justin and Andres, your uncle Andres, my brother, took the lead on Christmas Eve dinner, and it was really, really great.
Hank, this is kind of proving my point. Wouldn't it be fun if your parents had started the scrapbook, or we could, and you wouldn't have to say, what year was that? Because you would just turn the pages and you could say, oh yes, remember that was so fun, that meal.
I thought that was like last year though, or 2 years ago.
Another thing that we have done a little bit of, but even this we could be better at, is just like sending in photos to the places that print a book. And it's not really in the purview of what we're talking about here, but man, there's something about the simplicity of it and taking a little time, and then you have this physical.
And it still
Keeps it.
fits. And
And
you
it still
can add
fits.
words and stories.
And it's still a
I think that's
creative
equally
thing.
as valid as anything else. And it's the sitting, looking at the pictures, deciding
So
what
that's
to
our
do.
challenge to
That is a
ourselves,
challenge, yes.
and maybe to some of you.
It's just
that
a
need
different
little,
form of scrapbooking, but it is still
Yeah.
creative, and it is the stories that get lost. How many of us have boxes of old pictures, but there's no story to go with them? And I just think stories are what bring things to life.
It's funny how you think you'll never forget.
Yes,
And
exactly.
a few years later, like, oh wait, I just remembered that again.
Yes.
And 10 years later, it's maybe gone.
Yes. And then during COVID, we would still have Christmas in your garage, but with everything wide open. Yeah, the wood burning stove going, we would get takeout and sit in our coats and eat. Remember, it was just really, so, our Christmas has always been kind of go with the flow and do what you can.
And on that note, like, one thing even though we've kind of celebrated here traditions, it never felt like we were a family stuck in rules or expectations. There was always an open house. Mm-hmm. We have had so many guests join us. Mm-hmm. You've had so many customers from Starbucks. Mm-hmm. I had, friends from high school. Sometimes one year there was a stranger. I was just sitting next to him in like biology, and I found out he didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas, and he came. Mm-hmm. And you quickly got him a little gift, and he and I didn't really know each other. We always had a couple things stuck behind if anyone came, so we didn't feel left out. And we didn't give big gifts, so no, right.
So they fit in, but. And I remember you saying how fun it was to know that you could just call me and tell me he was coming, and that it wouldn't matter.
And that is a tradition that is true for you. I feel like it's not uncommon for us to have, friends that aren't home for the holidays with their own families come and join us. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Mm-hmm. Sharing our family with the space we create, we share with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it was returned to us by the guy that helped us try to find out if we had any mice in our house. He's from Vietnam, and he invited Karen and I to his house for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That was just, that just, how precious. We had just met him, and we had hired him to do some work, but we just hit it off, and I just love that feeling. And we were also, we were a crisis home for many years too, so we took in people with mental health issues in their life, challenges, that would stay with us up to 2 weeks at a time. So we often had extra people with us with whatever was going on in our daily life. So I think that also just kind of contributed to the flow.
I have a memory. It was probably, I don't remember, I think it was Christmas Day. It might have not been. There was a guy from Brazil at Grandma Olson's house. Mm-hmm. I think it was Christmas Day. He didn't speak any English. Mm-hmm. But one of us found out that he didn't have anywhere to go because his family was in Brazil. So he came for like the first 3 hours. Mm-hmm. That's I don't know why I remember that.
Yeah.
But that leaves an impression on you. Yep. Hearing from you is really wonderful, because I think the things that we do, that is, what young people grow up seeing. And so just that attitude.
And how many languages are you taking this year at school?
2.
2. So it inspired you.
What languages are you taking?
Ojibwe and Arabic.
Okay. So.
Well, and I think Hank just brought up a good point. Like, Hank does have the unique kind of special dynamic of his grandma and grandpa, Phil and Karen, have been friends with the two of you for a long time. Jamie and I grew up together.
Oh, yeah.
At the same church, but mostly at the same church camp. And so there's, of course, a lot of, like, similar values in having an open house and an open table and welcoming people to be a part of family traditions.
The only real difference is Norwegian and Swedish.
No.
Big battle there.
It took a while for the families to accept that Jamie and I were going to get married.
Yeah.
Even though I'm part Swedish too.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I would disagree with that. I was going to say, when you came home, no, it didn't take us a while. No, this is pretty funny. What I remember distinctly was when you came home one time, whatever it was, and you said you wanted to go out for coffee. And that was, in our world, was always the signal of something important to talk about. So this is even adults, remember that? And I said to Tim, this is what I remember, I said to Tim, either he's going to ask for money or he's going to say he wants to marry Jamie. Oh, I hope he's going to marry Jamie.
It was the latter, right?
That is, actually both.
No, but that was so, but it was so fun, because, we knew it would be something big, and those would be the 2 big things in your life at that age, and I thought that was...
Yeah, that was over 22 years ago now.
Yeah, so I thought, how fun.
Yep.
So anyway, that's just very precious.
We're all getting older.
All right, so we're going to close with the story of a card that made a difference. And again, we would love to hear your stories of a card that made a difference. And, we'd love to share them on this podcast.
So go to Stamping on the Back Porch on Facebook and share your stories. You'll see a question of the week, and we like to hear your stories anytime. Tonight we're talking about traditions. So I loved what Susan Bolbach wrote here. It says, I have saved cards for my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and parents, not for the card as much as for their personal signature. Every year I say I'm going to do something with them. Since 2024 is my year for letting go of what once was, I'm going to hang them in a banner so they can be the why I saved them. To bring those loved ones into my holidays as I recall the traditions we shared.